What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Lockdown Universe, home of the bizarre, peculiar, and unheard of stories of UFO legend and paranormal lore. Welcome back, welcome back. Happy to be back. Hopefully, you guys are doing awesome and taking care of yourselves. So, today we've got an interesting one, an abduction by the Mantis beings, and this individual was able to see into the future as well as get some information about these mantis like beings. So, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the DNA sequencing he found out about coming out of his body while they were doing the DNA sequencing, being separated from his body, his soul coming out of his body is really interesting. So, we're going to get into that. So, Happy New Year. Welcome back. 2025. Crazy to think about. But as of March, I believe March 20th was the first podcast I had done back in 2020. So we're going to be coming up on 5 years anniversary, man. I'm pretty excited, and it's interesting to look back at your old your very first podcast versus more current times. And I think I got significantly better and more confident over the first month or two, and I was kind of like battling like some depression. I was home, it was lockdown. It was actually lockdown, during COVID and everything. And I was trying to find something that was going to really interest me, and really keep me accountable. So I started doing the podcast, and I just started doing it every day, and it was really fun to do. But I noticed that I definitely needed some refining and some work. So there's always room to grow, right? There's always room to grow. So let's talk about this particular experiencer. I found him on Phantoms and Monsters, and what he stated in his report was, in 2019, I had my first fully memorable abduction experience. I was abducted and interrogated by two mantis aliens. One was obscuring themselves, and the other was revealing themselves to me. Have you ever seen the Flash show? The Flash is like constantly moving his face because he can like move so fast, so people can't recognize him if he ever has to like stop and talk to people in real time. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I wonder if that's what they're able to do, or if it's just like a psychic block on their face. Pretty interesting. Why would they have to psychically block their face? It's not like you're going to be able to point them out to the police. You know what I mean? It's not like you're going to be able to even probably recognize them from one mantis being to another. Why would they have to block their face? Is this some sort of like government op, or is this something that's just done by them naturally? Well, let's find out a little bit more. So the interrogation began as I was transported to a tranquil and isolated outer space. Both of the mantis aliens communicated to me telepathically, emphasizing how I was fearful of them and I was fearful of outer space. That's interesting. Okay. Eventually, the interrogation turned into a proclamation of love and protection. The visible mantis began to count. I do not remember them speaking at this time because I was focused on the illusion they created. They conjured numbers out of space dust, starting with the number one and the number fully formed above their head. They would use their mantis claw to grab the number and sharply toss it over their shoulder. They continued this pattern until they reached the number 11. I remember them skipping number 10. I'm not sure what the significance is. When they reached number 11, they took both of their clawed hands and ripped the numbers apart into single digits, tossing each one over their shoulder. They repeated this with the number 12. By the time they reached 12, I had a full blown spiritual experience and no longer feared what they were doing with those numbers. Seeing them rip apart the numbers made me laugh. Whenever I think about this, I think about when you're going in for surgery or an exploration or whatever, they put you under with anesthesia. They have you count backwards from, like, I don't know, 99 or whatever, or 10, or count up from 1 to 10, and you're usually out by like the third number that you count to. So this is kind of interesting. So by the time they reached 12, he had a full blown spiritual experience, and he no longer feared what they were doing with the numbers. So it's almost like I almost wonder if they were doing something similar to what we do with our anesthesia. When they realized I was laughing, they congratulated me on passing the test because they shared knowledge with me that they wanted me to share knowledge in return. This is where things got weird. They started to sequence my DNA. I was lying in bed and started to float and rattle about a foot off of the bed. My spirit was taken into outer space and was being worked on by the aliens. My body was floating toward outer space to reconnect with the part of me the aliens were researching. Whenever the research was done, I fell from outer space, landed in a forest flat on my back, and couldn't move. Forest insects like centipedes began to cover my body, and the aliens felt immense joy from this. They were seeking to humble me. After my body was dropped in the forest, I was then transported via spaceship to my bed. I woke up in bed breathing heavily as I fully re entered my body. The whole thing probably lasted around 5 minutes on Earth time. I have no doubt the Mantis aliens can warp space time. I'll keep talking about his experience in a second. I just want to stop here because there's a lot going on. So, what he's saying is that they separated his spirit from his body. They started to operate on his body and take care. I'm sorry, started to operate on his spirit and take care of his spirit and heal his spirit. I find that fascinating. I've heard of that in a few different experiences. He doesn't say what kind of technology they used. Did they use a certain kind of light spectrum on his spirit? Did they just kind of use their mind and their telepathy? How did they work on his spirit? That's what I'd want to know. I'd like to interview this person and get a little bit more info, but they do try to put a lot of false memories into your mind, and maybe he can't remember everything, but he can remember a few things. But maybe under hypnotic regression you can learn more. But they also were healing his body too. So isn't this fascinating? Because with these mantid beings, we hear a lot of stories about them being kind of evil or being malevolent, and then we hear stories about like these where they're not really being malevolent. They're being helpful. They're healing his body. They're healing his spirit, and they're trying to keep him. I don't know, in homeostasis, right? Trying to keep him, able to continue to function at a high level here on Earth. Why would they care so much? The only thing I can kind of relate to this is that I was listening to another individual. Her name's Elizabeth April. She is on Gaia, and she is a Galactic Federation contactee, and she has a few episodes on different series on Gaia. And what I really love is that she talks about going through hypnotic regression and having these hypnotic regressions, and they talk about her being in another body, a mantid-like body, during another encounter or another life encounter, lifetime. So, so I often wonder if they're operating on this human because this human in a past life was one of their friends, was a praying mantis, and came down to Earth as an experiment. That's just my theory. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying that's one theory. But it would kind of make sense because it almost seems like the aliens don't really care so much about us. They care more about like our DNA. They don't care so much about, our psychological development or spiritual development too much. They want us to develop, I think, because they don't want us to destroy everything. But they're not like coming down here and teaching classes, though, are they? So let's go back to the story here. So he's talking about his about him landing in that field, forest, and these little bugs creatures kind of crawling all over him, and he said they were trying to humble him. After his body was dropped into the forest, he said, I was transported via spaceship to my bed. I woke back up in bed breathing heavily as I re entered my body. The whole thing probably lasted about 5 minutes of Earth time. I have no doubt that the Mantis aliens can warp space time. They seemed very large and communicated with me from a large distance across space, but I was still able to see their entire body. The two aliens had a very strong telepathic and psychic bond. The obscured being basically lives inside the visible one so they could be both part of the process. I don't understand that. But, I mean, I can understand the concept, but why would he live inside of the visible one? Is it like a multi-dimensional thing? They seem to enjoy sequences or number sequence that was also a message that they were going to sequence my DNA. They seem to enjoy math. I was in college at the time, and after they gifted me this knowledge, I started taking advanced math and computer programming classes and did very well. He said, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, so that was it. That's the end there. So let's examine this a little bit. So at the very bottom, he talked about the fact that they were able to communicate with him from a large distance. So after him being abducted, they continued to communicate with him from vast distances. The weird thing is, he says two aliens had a very strong telepathic and psychic bond. Okay, well, maybe they're partners, right? The obscured one basically lives inside the visible one, so they could both be part of the process. I wonder if he means like when they communicate with him telepathically that they're both communicating with him, but he's only able to see the visible one, and the invisible one is also there, or whatever, the one that's obscured is also there, but he just can't see it. So they're communicating with him through a mental image of the visible one. They also seem to enjoy sequences and numbers. So in relation to his DNA, and it kind of got him on this path in college of taking these advanced math courses. So isn't it interesting that, number one, these mantis beings are a highly scientific, highly mathematical species. Not every species is like, is so focused on math. Some of them, like the Greys, they want our emotions. They want our emotions to communicate with their hybrids. But in relation to these mantids, they're really just math oriented, and like, trying to figure out the nature of the science of nature, the science of being. The more that we find out about science, the more that we can influence our future generations and our environment and our bodies. And the more that you can influence and change your bodies, the better you can fit in with the environment, the longer you'll be able to live, the better lifestyle you'll be able to live. So many people are living with all these physical challenges, even myself. Folks having, and everything from like, cancer, obviously, to heart disease, to COPD, to breathing issues, to autoimmune issues. All of those could be solved if we can figure out the solution, the natural, mathematical solution, whether it's medication, whether it's light therapy, whether it's meditation, whether it's listening to a certain frequency. And there's so many options out there. I mean, there's things that we know about, high levels of vitamin C, intravenously has been proven to reduce a lot of problems, a lot of things, from COVID related issues to cancer related issues to autoimmune related issues. And I mean, not all of us can just go get an IV of vitamin C all the time. That's not going to probably be covered underneath your insurance. You probably have to pay for it out of pocket. You could take a whole bunch of vitamin C, might destroy your stomach. It's pretty acidic. And apparently it's not as bioavailable as taken intravenously, but that's been proven. Zinc has also been proven to reduce the symptoms of cancer and reduce cancer as well, and colds. So there's a lot of different things out there, that are natural. Then there's things that we could create. A lot of people want to stay away from drugs. Well, I mean, the only cures that we have for a lot of things are not necessarily the best things for us, right? Like chemo, and stuff like that, and radiation. I mean, those things kill the good cells, and they kill the bad cells. So there's a lot for us to learn. I mean, as highly advanced as we think we are, there's so much for us to learn. And I think in the next 100 years, maybe 100 years, maybe 200 years, we're going to learn about like light therapy even more, and the frequencies, and people are going to start to accept that more as a primary method of medical assistance, and move towards that, as opposed to these medications that have these severe side effects. But they do help people. Chemo gets people through cancer. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But it also makes people, very sick too. And some people, they just don't want to go through it again, and they don't. So I find that the math, and the math interest, the advanced math interest that he gained after this abduction is interesting. It's almost like they kind of pushed him, or are influencing him in some way to follow that. Most of us don't like math. Most of us don't like it, even though it makes sense. Most of us don't want to sit there and do math. We're more, if you're a science person, I get it. Hey, more power to you. I'm just not. I'm more of an art person. I like to paint. I like to draw. I like to look at beautiful artwork. I like media. I like movies. I like things like that. I'm not one to sit there and be like, okay, 15 times, times 30 to the third power. I've never been good at that. I think it's super interesting. Chemistry is super interesting, but I was horrible at chemistry. I got a D in chemistry in high school. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. I get that, you could take certain electrons, and that you can match it up with another element, and if you get the right mix, then you can have two different elements come together for a chemical. But isotopes, and I just don't get it all. So anyway, I'm glad there are people that are interested in it and are able to understand it. So, do you think that there's aliens out there that are more focused on art, music, and kind of like, I don't know, the what is it, right side of the brain interests versus left side of the brain interests of math and science. Um, a lot of these aliens don't seem to be super, what's the word, interested in communicating with us on a conversational level. We're more their subjects. Meanwhile, according to Randy Kramer, some of those folks on, like, in the Cassiopeian system, they're only like 150 years more advanced than us, but they have the spaceships, which we apparently do too, that are able to travel pretty much anywhere. But they're just a little bit more advanced spiritually, a little bit more advanced, societally, that kind of thing. It's interesting that he's found and interacted with, and he even had a child with one of these Cassiopeians. Meanwhile, we have these mantid beings that are just more science and math related. It's not that uncommon to think about. I mean, America, we're so focused on like the entertainment industry. That's our main export. And we're not so much focused on math. We're like really horrible at it. Meanwhile, you have like China and Japan, and those countries are super focused on well, especially China, super focused on science and math. They produce a lot of goods, and that's like their main focus. Japan is a little bit more art, interested in art, and has it more integrated into their society. But they have some amazing technology that comes out of Japan. Japan's really living in like 2050. The rest of us are living in like 2020 still. So, I mean, the stuff that's coming out of there, if you see videos of Japan, it's amazing. The stuff that they have. So there are societies even here on Earth that are more focused and have more exports of entertainment goods, and others that are more focused on science and math. And so it's not that impossible to think that there's other species that are more focused on, humanities versus science. So anyway, I'll let that go. I'll let it be at that. I just wanted to share that with you. Get your thoughts, get your ideas, and kind of see what you guys think. Leave a comment in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you guys. Please like, follow, share, subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, and you're helping the podcast continue to grow, which is hard to do right now. I mean, it's hard to grow right now. I have dedicated listeners, but growing wise, it's really hard to grow out there. Man, Spotify's really pushing their own, and Spotify's pushing others. So for the little guy like us, it's hard to get anything out there. So please share. Please just share. That'd be great. That's my New Year's ask of you guys. My New Year's gift from you guys would be for you to just share a few episodes on your page. Be like, oh, I like this episode. Just share it on your Facebook or your Instagram or whatever social media you do. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Take care of yourselves physically, spiritually, emotionally. Follow through on your hobbies and your goals and your dreams. And as always, continue to question the universe around you. Till next time, take care. Lockdown Universe out. Peace.